Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. I'm about to start the show, and I just want to make sure that you know about my best-selling book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It is, just like the title says, the art of awareness and attack survival. It'll show you the techniques that attackers use to pinpoint your vulnerabilities, the avenues of approach, and when and where the best time is to attack. And now it doesn't matter what type of attack you're talking about. These techniques are pretty much universal for targeting, and you can understand them so you can look at yourself from that perspective and then come up with better defenses, better plans of action. When there's nothing that you can actually do, you have to be there. You still need a plan of action on how to get out or away from any type of danger. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's got 2 workbooks. And then for the children, you can go check out The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. It's a book of pictures that have safety and awareness built into it. And you go to teamlittlebigs.com and get the lesson plans, give the book to the children, and then you teach them through the pictures. The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. And it's 2 workbooks available anywhere that books are sold. And let's start the show.
The truth has arrived.
My name is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. And welcome back to the Friday episode. I guess it's really more than the Friday episode since I've only done a couple of episodes this week. And you know what's interesting? I don't know what this is all about, but the fewer shows I do, the bigger numbers I get. Now, that's opposite of what most people get. I think the key to podcasting is to do multiple short shows. But listen, I'm not just in this to try to get sponsors and to make money, which just seems like that's the majority of the reason that people get into podcasting these days, or because they think they have a lot of stuff to say. Doing it on a daily basis in this day and age, there's a lot of news to report. But by and large, as I've always said over the past, 5-7 years that I've been doing radio and media, television, and podcasting, is that quite often the news is the same news. It's just repackaged, or it's the same idiots in politics that are saying the same thing. It's just they're just saying it a little bit different today than they did last month. And so what you have to look at is the story behind the headlines, basically. And that's what I always talk about, is how you can look at the news and really see the reality of what it's showing, even when they're not trying to show you that. And as I've been saying in every podcast that I've done since January 6th, the reality is that what happened on January 6th was that basically everything that we didn't do culminated in a socialist, communist, globalist, leftist political party now owning every seat, they own the majority of every branch of government. I started to say every seat in every branch, but they don't own everyone. There are still some true conservatives or people who care about the Constitution out there, but not all of them are even in the Democrat Party. The Republican Party and the establishment in the Republican Party is broken. I'll talk more about that before the end of this episode, but what keeps coming back every time I turn the news on, and I purposely don't turn it on as often so that I can turn it back in and then see the reality of what's actually occurring, what that story is behind the headline. And again, I keep coming back to the fact that there are no checks and balances in government. The only check and balance that they have now, and this is the one thing that came out of January 6th that was actually worth anything, is that like any group that's in power that is evil or gets in power through nefarious means, which I absolutely believe the Democrat Party got into power and has maintained power through nefarious means. It doesn't mean that they stole every election, but it means that years and years of indoctrination of people owning and running media and the news and Hollywood and just indoctrinating the population over and over again, at the same time condemning any other form of expression. Whenever there is a group like that, the only thing that they really fear, besides another nation state coming in and trying to conquer them, the only thing they really fear is the population turning on them. That's really all they fear, because throughout history, that's the only thing that's been effective at ousting leftists once they get in. And sometimes it takes hundreds of years for that to occur. So here we are with no checks and balances whatsoever in the federal government. And when we say the federal government, this is something that I know you're seeing, but it's something that you have to pay close attention to. There really is no swamp. It's a family tree, which I've said over and over again. This family tree is composed of politicians. Really, it's establishment, Washington, D.C., political establishment people. Some of them are in the Republican Party. Almost all of them in the Democrat Party are a part of this family tree. The big money donors, the people from, like Wall Street, for instance, who don't really care as long as they're making money. And they'll give money to these people. They'll fund things that they're doing. Silicon Valley is completely funded, by either Wall Street or Silicon Valley billionaires. And Silicon Valley, for instance, is a part of this family tree. The media, mainstream media, and most online publications are a part of this. Publishing houses are a part of it, where the books are published. You could go on and on. When we say the family tree, or the people mention the swamp or the deep state, right? It also includes agencies of all different types in the federal government, and nonprofits. That's another good one. And activists, right? Then there's more than this, but I'm starting to build this family tree, and you're seeing where it's going. Is that really is the government now? There really is no differentiation between the federal government and, say, mainstream media, because mainstream media, the government is now owned by the Democrats, and that is scary to me. That is a very scary thing, but it's owned by the Democrats, and the mainstream media is just their echo chamber. And just like what's happening right now with the lies, again, I reach out to everybody I know that's still in federal law enforcement and in state and local law enforcement. I reach out to all these people, and I keep querying them. Where are the headlines about these white nationalist attacks with white supremacists killing and murdering and carrying out all these terrorist attacks? Where are these terrorist attacks that everybody, Homeland Security and all these Democrat congressmen and senators are screaming about, and mainstream media is reporting, and publications online? Where is all this? Because I'm not seeing it, and I didn't see it when I was in the FBI, and I would have seen it in the positions I was in, and I never saw it. It doesn't exist. That's why, but it exists in the narrative. And just like the dossier that was created, this fake dossier that was created against Trump back when he first became president, and that dossier was created by people within the FBI and the Democrat and Republican never-Trumpers, and they hand this over to the FBI. Well, I mean, they didn't hand it over. The FBI knew it was coming. So they played this big game. They create this dossier. The FBI has it. They leak the information to the media. The media then reports on it, which the media knew it wasn't a real leak. This is all staged. They leak, or they report on this dossier. And then the FBI takes that information that was reported in the news as though that's real evidence. I mean, that I've never heard of a court of law accepting, evidence that was just hearsay based on what a media report was. I mean, at least I did. That's not the way I was raised to think in the FBI. But they took this, went to a FISA court judge, and used the very stuff that they had leaked about something that they had created and manufactured to get a FISA warrant and go out and spy on all these people in Trump's campaign, including Trump. Well, it's the same thing here. All this talk after January 6th about white nationalists and Christian white nationalists, now they're saying that. Now that's a big thing. I'm going to talk about that in a second. They're taking that, and then the Department of Homeland Security and all these bigwigs at the top that have been they're either standing in or have actually been put into or sworn in under Joe Biden, or they were already there. See, here's the other thing. There was a lot of people in these agencies that didn't like President Trump. They were all put in there by Obama. They just rode that time in there, and now they're up there in the top, and they automatically will do whatever they're told because, again, they're all part of this family tree. You don't need to think anymore about separation of the different branches of government, about checks and balances, about media and journalism versus the government. It's all the same. It's all one big happy family, leftist, communist, socialist, globalist tree. And so when you're looking at the news now, with the exception of really Newsmax and One American News, I mean, you can't really trust anything else, but you can listen. And you will see what I'm talking about as you listen. You will start to see that it is just like the Dossier. They create the news, or they create the narrative. The news reports the narrative, and then they go on the House floor or the Senate floor, and they talk about what is being reported in the news that they created themselves. So this whole thing about Christian white nationalists and all this stuff that they used January 6th to propel forward. And now they're even saying, like an Ocasio-Cortez telling Ted Cruz he should resign because her life is threatened now because of Ted Cruz and the stuff that they've used this, and they're just going full force. Because remember, I said this is so crazy. 2 years ago, I wrote an op-ed, and I couldn't get anybody to publish this op-ed. And I still have it, but the op-ed was when Nancy Pelosi and the squad were going head to head. You know, it looked like they were not getting along. And what the whole piece was about, it was that it's not that they believe different things. Nancy Pelosi and the squad believe the same thing. AOC and Nancy Pelosi believe the same thing. It was the speed at which they felt that this movement could be ushered in. And the old guard, which is Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who they're still there in power, but they work at a different pace. And what you're seeing now with AOC and all these other individuals is that they are just moving lightning fast. They're just moving very quickly. And the stuff that she says is so vile because that's the speed at which they move. They do everything that they accuse Donald Trump of doing, and they're going to get worse. You mark my word on it, they're going to get worse. Just like, okay, I've been looking back on some of the stuff that I predicted, and it's not that I'm a seer. I'm not some anonymous source that has special clearance. The fact is, this stuff is not hard to see. And with my training and experience of investigating and not trying to figure out something or a motive that's not there, taking the evidence that's there and analyzing that evidence, I've been able to point out many, many different things that were going to occur. And because it's predictable. It's predictable what the left does. And you can predict it if you don't get caught up in hero worship and going down this path of thinking that it's your duty to sit on your couch and wait for a plan to happen. Listen, this stuff is not rocket science, right? And it's not make-believe. So if it's too good to be true, it probably is. But this stuff is right in your face. It's right here, and you can see it whenever you turn the news on or you listen to what these politicians have to say. When I was looking, one of the things that's coming out now, I guess yesterday, there was a second Capitol Police. Well, it wasn't Capitol Police. It was a second police officer that was involved or was there on January 6th. And that killed himself. They say died. Okay, so this is the way the reporting goes. I'm going to read to you what NBC in Connecticut says. A second police officer who defended the U.S. Capitol during the mob attack on January 6th has died by suicide. No, he committed suicide. He killed himself. But because of the way they're trying to tell this story, they're saying that he died by suicide. He killed himself, okay? I'm going to read the rest of this, but you should know right now, immediately, is when somebody commits suicide, there's a lot more going on than some event that just occurred, unless that was a very violent event, right? To my knowledge, this officer was not violated during that episode. That riot, basically, is what it turned into, a protest that turned into a riot on January 6th at the Capitol building. This guy had problems. And it happens all the time in law enforcement. The suicide rate in law enforcement is, I think it's like 3 times that of the civilian population. So it says a second police officer who defended the U.S. Capitol during the mob attack on January 6th has died by suicide. He killed himself. The acting chief of the Metropolitan Police Department said this week. Chief Robert J. Conti III, very sophisticated, told a House committee on Tuesday that Officer Jeffrey Smith, a 12-year veteran of the Metro Police Department, had killed himself recently. Okay, now they're going to say he killed himself, okay? Another officer, Howard Liebengood, who joined the Capitol Police in 2005, died by suicide. Again, died by suicide. He killed himself 3 days after the attack. Right, now this, if you don't understand the reality of how many cops kill themselves, this story would make it sound like these guys they were there on January 6th. It was so traumatic that they killed themselves. Well, that's not the case. Can guarantee you that's not the case. These guys had tremendous issues if they just killed themselves. And he was 51. The other guy, I don't know how old the other guy was, which I do believe that low testosterone in a lot of these cops, low testosterone, the stress of the job, and the feeling of worthlessness will overcome these people, and they'll kill themselves. That's what happens a lot of the times. The last thing, this is what the chief says. Other harm from this traumatic day will be widely felt, but possibly acknowledged, Conti said. Unacknowledged, excuse me. Law enforcement training neither anticipates nor prepares for hours of hand-to-hand combat. Well, okay. First of all, if law enforcement is not teaching the proper mindset or for officers to be prepared for hours of conflict, then their police department is not fully trained in their officers. I've been through 3 academies, 2 academies, and one when I was at Camp Robinson Police Department. We didn't go through the academy. I went through on-the-job training, but 3 different law enforcement trainings, and the FBI Academy is being one of those. And every day at the FBI Academy, we boxed and wrestled. I mean, we fought every day, preparing for the fight. Probably in the FBI Academy, we were prepared, which is very strange. We prepare more for the fight than most police departments prepare their street officers who are actually going to be in the fight most of the time. Most FBI agents will never be in a fist fight with anybody, but we fight every day and we wrestle, and it teaches a tremendous amount of that warrior mindset, although I would not equate most of the people I knew in the FBI to being warriors. But these officers and what occurred with these 2 guys killing themselves had nothing to do with January 6th. If that was the excuse that they had issues before that. I 100% can guarantee it. But you see how that's reported, right? Then you look at the way that Ocasio-Cortez uses this to go after Ted Cruz. So this whole thing about which I'm going to try to have somebody on eventually to talk about the financial stuff that's going on with GameStop. I can kind of explain it, but it's not my specialty. But Ted Cruz tweeted out because AOC was said something about her support for the people the day traders basically that were going against these big hedge fund people and that were shorting GameStop, and these home traders or day traders all got together. It was like 2 million. I've never heard of any other circumstance where 2 million people got together and actually did something right in this nation. But they got together and they started buying these stocks and running the price up, which if hedge fund operators are shorting stock and then the price goes up real quick, they lose a tremendous amount of money. And they knew this, and that's why they did it. It was their main objective. It wasn't that GameStop was any better. I mean, GameStop is really kind of, I think it's going to be a dinosaur, but they were doing this to punish these hedge fund people. So she was siding with the day traders. Ted Cruz liked that. He tweeted at her. And so she responded, happy to work with almost any other GOP that aren't trying to get me killed, as though Ted Cruz is out there plotting with these white nationalists to get her killed. Right? It's not happening, not true, made up narrative. She goes on to say, in the meantime, if you want to help, you can resign. While you conveniently talk about moving on, here's the narrative, okay? This is the way I'm talking about. This is why you cannot differentiate anymore between government and media and the rest of this family tree. She says, while you conveniently talk about moving on, a second Capitol police officer lost their life yesterday in the still raging aftermath of the attacks you had a role in. She's talking about on January 6th. She says, this isn't a joke. We need accountability, and that includes a new senator from Texas. So she's blaming Ted Cruz for inciting a riot, which there were hundreds of thousands of people there that weren't rioting, but for inciting this riot and for this police officer killing himself. She's laying all that on Ted Cruz. And the way that they back this up is by a leftist police chief. We know that the police chief in Washington, D.C. is a leftist. We know that the media is left. And so I know people are going to say, really, are they in cahoots? Yes. It is not a conspiracy theory. These people all work together. And the ones that aren't privy to the actual narrative being passed around, like they do with the media, they go along with it because they literally believe anything that these people say. So that's how this gets spun up. And I'm going to give you a little story. I don't think I've told this story on here before, but this is a perfect example of how this stuff works, okay? We had a great operations officer at SEAL Team 4. I'm not going to say his name. And he had, and I don't think he'll ever hear this, but it's quite amusing, or it was amusing to me then. I mean, they were out in the field. This was before I ever met him. And apparently he was at night and he was cutting a rope, and he was cutting the rope with the knife turned towards him. And when the knife went through the rope, it hit him in the forehead and cut his forehead open. And when I heard this story, I was a brand new junior officer at SEAL Team 4. Didn't even have my trident yet. Had been through BUDS, and jump school, but was waiting to go through SEAL tactical training. And so they sent me down to Panama to do junior officer training with a platoon down there. And I said a joke to the operations officer before I left about cutting himself in the head with a knife. Well, I was a JO. This guy was lieutenant. I should have kept my mouth shut. But, I was a jovial guy, kind of lost a lot of the sense of humor for these reasons. But he didn't. He thought it was funny, but he wanted to rib me back. He wanted to get me back because I was a junior officer. So I go down to Panama. I was down there for, 2-3 months down there, Panama, South America. And so he came up with this entire scheme to get me back for this joke that I think I had said it in front of some people, and he didn't like that. So if my memory is serving me correct. So they came up with this scheme to gin up fake orders. I mean, they were real orders, but they weren't real. I wasn't getting shipped off anywhere, but they were real as far as being printed out and given a serial number. And it was the real military orders that you would get if you're getting shipped off to somewhere. And they had everybody in on this joke. The commanding officer at SEAL Team 4, the commanding officer at the unit down at Panama, the operations officer down there was in on it, and maybe one or two other people. But everybody else there had no idea that this was a joke. They didn't know that these orders were fake. So I get called into the operations officer, into his office down in Panama, and he says, now remember, the operations officer that I made the joke about was up at SEAL Team 4 in Little Creek, Virginia. I'm now down in Panama. So these two operations officers have been coming up with this scheme, and including all the bigwigs in it, and they all signed off on it. That's how crazy the teams are. They all thought this was going to be relatively hilarious, I guess, at my expense. So he shows me these orders, and he said, listen, I got some bad news for you. And I'm like, okay, you never want to hear bad news while you're in the military. And he says, unfortunately, I know you went through BUDS and airborne school, and you're waiting to go through SEAL tactical training, but they've ran out of billets for SEAL officers. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And would I just sit at the team for a while? He said, no, you have to go to surface warfare. You have to go drive ships. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, they're going to send you, and you're going to go through surface warfare school, and then you'll be out in the fleet. And I was like, well, when do I come back? And he said, well, I don't know. I mean, he goes, you may have to go back through BUDS again. I was like, I couldn't tell if he was kidding or not, but then he showed me the orders, and my CO at SEAL Team 4 had signed off on those. The commander down there had signed off on them. The operations officer up there had signed off on them. And I was shocked. It's the least of what I was. I mean, I was blown away, and I was in a haze. And so I'm walking around thinking, what is going to happen in my career with my life? I trained. I mean, listen, you don't just go to BUDS and your training starts there. I trained for 3 years in college, and then and I graduated in 95. I didn't go into the teams until 97. And I was training for probably 3 to 4 years before I went into the Navy to get in the physical shape that I needed to be in, which was Olympic caliber shape. I mean, when you go to BUDS, you are at a athletic level with people who were in the Olympics. We had alternates in the Olympic team in my BUDS class, one of the swimmers. And we had gymnasts that were in our class that dropped out. He was a great guy, but he didn't like the cold. But it took me 4 years to get to that level. Once I get to SEAL training, then that's a whole nother 10 months there at BUDS, and then you go through all these other schools and SEAL tactical training. So I felt like my life was coming to an end. And you're probably asking yourself, where is this going? How does this have to do with anything that we were talking about? Well, I'll tell you. There were certain people that were in on the joke, as I told you, but the rest of the command was not. And so everybody was like walking up to me going, what's wrong with you, man? Because I mean, I obviously look like a guy just seen a ghost. And I said, and I told them what happened, and they were just as shocked as I was, and it reinforced what I felt. And then some of them got mad at the command, and they were mad at Naval Special Warfare, and guys were like, this is horse crap, and you shouldn't have to go through this. They're screwing your career up. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So, and it spread throughout the command. Now, all these people that didn't know it was a joke are freaking out themselves because they think that it could possibly happen to them. That's reinforcing me in believing that this is real. And this went on all day long. It's probably one of the reasons why I ended up with anxiety later on, and then finally defeated that later on. A lot of guys that get out of the military and the teams will go through a period where they have anxiety, and I did, and that probably played part of it right there. But so at the end of the day, the operations officer comes up to me and he goes, how you doing, man? And I was like, not good. I said, my life is basically over. And when I said that, I guess the reality of that this was this has gone far beyond a joke. He said, whoa, your life is not over. Okay. This is all just a joke. And I was like, I said, dude, this is no joke, man. This is my life. He goes, no, I'm telling you, this whole thing is a joke. It's a ruse. We're just pulling one over on you. There's no orders. Those are fake. And I'm like, what? And part of me was completely relieved The other part was like, I can't believe, and I'm a pretty easygoing guy, so I started laughing, but it really had a profound effect on me. It really shook me up pretty good. So they took me in there, and I talked to the operations officer from SEAL Team 4, and he told me, he said, I guess you won't be making any more jokes about guys with knives, will you? That's what it all came down to. But the point is that this occurred, and the way that it unfolded is exactly like what you see in the news, exactly what you see in the government, exactly what you see with these activists that are out here and these little media publications online, these special interests and these nonprofits. They spin this stuff up. They then report on it as though it's fact, and then they use this on the floor, these politicians in Congress, to basically back up what the narrative that they created. Just like when I went through this, I had no clue. I thought my life was over. So I hope that I know that's a long way around to make a point, but this is the way this is the way this stuff works. It was a joke for me down in South America, but this is no joke here in the United States. And the interesting thing about it, that feeling that I felt where I said, I think my life is over, it's the same thing here. People are thinking that there are white supremacists that are just scouting out Washington, D.C. and all the politicians to take them out. It's not true. They're thinking that people that love and care about this country, that are patriots, are also these deviant, dirty militia wanting to kill everything and go to war types of people. It's not true. They're good people, patriots, love this nation, and are concerned about it. These people are spinning up this stuff, and then they're reporting it not only in the news, not only talking about it on the floor, but DHS and these other agencies that are reporting on this as though it is real, is exactly like what I went through, but on a very dangerous scale. And I keep waiting for somebody like the operations officer down there to come up and say, no, this isn't real. It's all fake. But that's not going to happen, because it is real. It is real in the way that the anxiety, the worry, the peoples whose lives can be ruined. I know teachers who have been almost fired, and some of them have been fired for stuff that they didn't even do, just because they have a conservative belief. People reporting to their schools that they were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. They weren't there. They were sitting at their school, working. And it has dangerous consequences. In fact, it's so dangerous that if things do occur, I would equate more of what's occurring because of this narrative than anything that President Trump ever did, and anything that people who are, longing for battle ever instigated. These are the instigators. This fake news. And just like that day when the operations officer asked me, how I'm doing, and I said, my life is over, a lot of people are starting to get to the point where they believe this nation is done. And they may be actually right in a lot of ways. I tell you what, let's take a break real quick, and we'll come back. And then I just want to talk real quickly about this other narrative and nonsense that's going on, and how it affects you at church. We'll be right back. Hey, I just want to tell you real quick about ConnectZing. I thought I'd add some music and make the commercial interesting. If you haven't checked out ConnectZing, you need to go do it right now. ConnectZing.com. What ConnectZing is the next evolution of social media. Why am I saying it's the next evolution? Because you're not going to be censored there. And it is just the beginning to so much more that's coming down the pipe. Trust me when I tell you this. My buddy Drago, who lived in socialist Poland and was put in a gulag for having a typewriter, got out, came to the United States, became a Navy SEAL, an American citizen, did 20 years retired, and is now a computer programmer. Him and his wife Rachel, Air Force Academy grad, myself, have developed something that is coming very soon that is going to blow you away. But right now, the start of this is ConnectZing.com. Go check it out. Go join it. And get away from these other social media platforms that are owned by Silicon Valley. We own all the servers. We're not going to get shut down. And you will have a platform. ConnectZing.com. That's ConnectZing, ZING.com. Go join it and become a zinger. Go do it today. And let's get back to the show. All right. I haven't done a commercial in a long time like that. I figured I'd just throw it in there. What the heck? So make sure you go check that out, ConnectZing.com. And I just want to, real quick, I just want to play something here for you. So ridiculous. This is about a thing called the BJC, which is the, if I can find it here, the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, the BJC. Now that sounds like a real Southern Baptist type of group of people who are standing for your freedoms and your freedom of religion and so on and so forth. But listen, like everything else I've been telling you in this show, it is a leftist organization designed under a narrative to fool you. And I want to play real quick their little soundbite that they have, and I want to go through this with you. Now, this is on YouTube, and it's also on their webpage, so it shouldn't cause me a problem playing this. Hopefully it won't. So this is, just listen to this.
Religious liberty is under great strain today. The term religious liberty is used in strategic ways to its detriment. BJC is dedicated to religious freedom in the historic Baptist tradition and American tradition that holds.
Okay, now that's a lie straight from the beginning, because that is not who these people are. They are leftists, okay? So they're lying to you right from the beginning, right, to make you think that they're out there to support and defend religious freedom. But that's not quite the way it is.
Up the separation of church and state as an essential way of protecting religious freedom for all.
So they're talking about the separation of church and state, right? They're going to protect the religion for all people, right? But they don't say this isn't about freedom for religion for all people. This is the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty. So they throw Baptists in there, right? But the reality is this is about the leftists and about not just about religion, but it's about guarding leftists against people who stick by their religious beliefs, right? Now, not all people, not all religious, mainly Christians is who they stand against, not for, right? They're actually, this is a way for them to basically keep Christians in check by using this name. And listen who's a part of this.
BJC is the only faith-based organization working on the national level that works solely on protecting religious freedom for all people. BJC is a team of lawyers.
Okay, hold on. It's not just lawyers, but I think it's very interesting how that's like a bragging point for them.
Ministers, people with Capitol Hill experience.
Ministers, right? I mean, I don't know if you realize this, but you can go become a reverend. What is a minister actually, right? Well, a minister is not just a leader of a church. It's a lot of people who go around and use that as a way of, it's like somebody who says they're an author. Yeah, they wrote a book, but it didn't sell 5 copies, right? So, yeah, I guess they're considered an author, but they're a published author, but they published it themselves. They couldn't even get picked up by a publishing house. Anyway, ministers are kind of the same way. So, lawyers, ministers, people from Capitol Hill,
Educators, scholars.
Educators and scholars, not the most conservative people. In fact, they are far left. Many of them are socialist / communist.
Education and development professionals.
Education and development professionals. Automatically that tells you if they're involved, this is a leftist organization.
United in our commitment to defending religious freedom for all.
I'm telling you, I just was laughing the whole time I'm listening to this. They're united in their commitment for religious liberty for all. Baptists, again, their first name in their group is Baptist, okay?
All people. Today, we see a lot of confusion about what the term religious liberty even means.
Okay, here we go, okay? Religious liberty, as the founding fathers were describing it and the way they held it so important, was that the government would never tell you how you had to worship, right? It didn't say that the government, people in government, couldn't be proud of their religion. They couldn't display their religion. It says the separation of church and state is that the state will never make you worship a religion, right? It will never control your religion. Doesn't say anything about you having religious beliefs and not wanting to bend in those religious beliefs, right? In fact, when the courts are used against you and your religious beliefs, the separation of church and state dissolves, which is totally opposite of what these people are talking about. But listen to her.
Often, when people are claiming that their religious liberty is being threatened, they're really talking about the fact that someone else's choice or even a law is not in line with their own religious beliefs.
Now, what they're showing is, in a narrow decision, Supreme Court sides with Baker, who turned away a gay couple, right? Do I agree with it? I mean, no, but is it his right to do that? Yeah, I believe it is, because it's his religious ideology. I mean, go buy a cake somewhere else. And this is old. I'm not going to rehash this whole freaking really useless controversy and debate. It really went so far in the Supreme Court. I think it wasted a lot of time. If people would just let you believe that, you just be your way. I'll go buy a cake somewhere else. Or the person who's a Christian saying, you know what? Listen, I don't believe in it, but come on in. I'm going to make you the greatest cake ever. You know, this is just stupid. But listen, and in fact, when we scroll down and we look at the things that they've argued, one of the things is that they argued against the people who own the bakery. And they felt as though they should not be protected in their religious rights in how they feel. They felt as though they filed a brief arguing that the baker's religious beliefs do not provide a blanket exemption to state laws that protect customers against discrimination in commercial marketplace. In other words, they're saying, this is the Baptist whatever, or fake Christian, are saying that the government can tell you that despite your religion, you will do business with these people, right? So this is where, and again, I'm not trying to get into a gay straight debate here, but the fakeness of this is what you have to understand, and how deeply rooted the leftists are now, and that they're even claiming to be a Baptist Christian group for religious liberty, when in fact they're trying to break down your religious liberty if you're a Christian. And so let me back up just a little bit so you can hear what she says here.
A law is not in line with their own religious beliefs. That's not necessarily a threat to religious liberty. That's more a concern about the loss of religious privilege.
Religious privilege. All right. So now you have religious privilege, right? So it's not just white privilege or anything that they don't like, that they make up this privilege. It's now religious privilege, right? Or Christian privilege is basically what she's saying. She is she looks like about as uptight as a freaking bolt that's about to break.
BJC is concerned about the targeting of religious minorities.
We have to work to.
There you go. Religious minorities. They're not so concerned with religious freedom like they say for all people to be able to believe what they want. They're really concerned about minorities being able. That's really all that they're about, is minority, not just religious people, but as you just saw what they were saying there a second ago, you know, gay people over somebody who's Christian or any other religion that doesn't believe in that and wants to exercise the way that they feel. They don't believe. That's not what they're there for.
Make sure that individuals are protected in the free exercise of religion, and to make sure that government does not unnecessarily interfere in our faith.
They go back and forth. They're talking about government, and then they're talking about how people who are actually religious and have a belief should be governed.
Means the government doesn't take sides when it comes to religion.
But they are saying that the government should take sides. That's what's crazy about this. I'm only going to play a few more seconds of this. You can go look it up. But the whole thing is absolutely ridiculous, but it's a good example of what I've been talking about today.
doesn't favor one religion over another. It leaves religious matters to religious institutions and to individuals.
And that is an absolute complete lie. That is not what they're all about. So one of the things that they got involved with was the Johnson Amendment. Should Congress repeal a law that bars houses of worship and charitable organizations from engaging in partisan campaigns? And they led and organized more than 100 denominations. They say of 5,000 faith leaders asking Congress to keep the Johnson Amendment in. For this reason, it protects houses of worship from the pressure that came with partisan campaigning, including turning their offering plates into political slush funds. Well, that's not the reality of what they believe. They don't want Christians uniting to stand behind one politician. They don't want a preacher to be able to say, based on the Bible, I believe this person is a better choice. They don't want that, and that's why that's the way it is. They had the one about the chef. They went to battle for the girl who was a Muslim who wanted to wear her burqa, and Abercrombie and Finch tried to tell her that she couldn't. I agree with that one. I agree that she should be able to wear it. And the Supreme Court held that one right, that Abercrombie couldn't tell her that she couldn't wear that. And anyway, the reality of me telling you about this is the fact that these groups are out there. If you want to look up more about this, the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberties, they are on, the reason I even recognize them is that they are on a tear right now, a tyrant, because they're going after supposed white Christian nationalists is what they're calling them, who love this country and believe in the Constitution, and they're vilifying them, and that's what this group is doing. They're basically gathering together with the left and AOC and all these weirdos in media, and now they're trying to add a religious spin to it, saying that people who stand against the government are not Christian. So very interesting when you look at this and you see how far and widespread the narrative is. If you are liberal and you're listening to this show, you should pause for a second and start to see if you can see the big picture here. And it really has nothing to do with what's safe or what's better. It has to do with controlling people on all levels. And if you think you're liberal and that's not going to affect you, you're wrong. Just like I thought that I was a team guy already, even though I didn't have my Trident at the time. I thought I was part of the community, and I thought I could just say and joke about whatever I wanted to when I was down there. And I found out the brutal truth that as a junior officer, I need to shut my mouth and not try to joke around with the guys who already had their Trident. And I suffered the wrath from that. Well, it's the same thing here. If you're liberal and you think you're just in with them and that you're just because you're liberal, but you love being free and you think, well, I'm just a Democrat and I'm going to vote this way, it's going to come back to bite you because they don't care about you. They don't care about you, and you may think you're on their team, but you're just a water boy or a towel boy or the person that gets the dirty jock strap thrown at you at the end of the day. That's all you are. You're just a tool for them to go play the game. That's the truth. Now, it's important that you realize, as I've said before on this show, that it's not a swamp in Washington, D.C. It's a family tree. And it's important for you to visualize that, because the more you understand every limb, every piece of tree bark that's on that, every root that goes under the ground, they are not there for you. They are there to sustain the life of that tree. You may think that this candidate or that candidate or this media personality or this big money person has everybody's best interest at heart, but they don't if they're a part of the family tree. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and I'm out of here.